Hello, and welcome back to another episode on the Revere End podcast channel. Today, me and Billy are just going to be looking at quite a topical question on some Norwich fans' mind at the minute is Todd or Emi. Now, before we kind of get into this and kind of have a little bit of a discussion, it's worth noting this isn't us advocating that we want to sell Todd or Emi. It's just realistically, well, it might not be, you'll find out, but realistically, it's us saying it's very likely one of these assets are going to leave, whether it be this summer or January. And I guess we're just kind of having a discussion about maybe if we were to be able to pick one, that luxury, then who would it be? So, I mean, Bill, I'll kind of pass over to you first for a start. I mean, where do you want to kind of start looking at? Is maybe last season is a good kind of comparable point to kind of look at?
Yeah, I think last season's statistics are obviously in the Premier League is a really good sort of comparison point, really. I think what the aim of this video is really trying to do is to sort of look at the two players and compare them because they are very similar players, but they have notable differences. And I think that's what we're trying to do is see, okay, where are these two players in their careers and go from there, really, because it is quite a poignant topic. I think this was semi-inspired by Ben Ambrose's video on Norwich Talk. So, in case anyone thinks we're copying him, because everyone likes to make point on on Norwich City content, isn't it? You can't do anything without copying someone. And then I think Michael Bailey done a article as well today on a similar topic. So, like I say, yeah, it's quite a relevant discussion point at the moment. I mean, yeah, let's take a look at those stats because it was kind of a break. I don't want to say it was a breakout season for both of them. It was definitely a breakout season for Todd Cantwell. Really put his name on the map, and I think we already knew what Emi could do. It was just about doing it on the bigger stage. But let's have a look at those stats. I mean, if we look at the sort of the appearances, the goals and assists, straight away you can tell that Todd's more of a goal threat and Emi's more of a creator. Really, like that. As simple as that. Really. Todd's 6 goals to Emi's 1, but just the 2 assists compared to Emi's 7. So. I think both have 8 goal contributions in a fairly similar amount of football. I think is that just Todd's just played 1 extra game, so as you can see, there isn't really much in that. Both are very effective in terms of the Norwich's attacking output, which is pivotal really, and is a major reason why they were such key cogs of this Norwich City system, I suppose. I don't know if you maybe want to talk about sort of the defensive side of them both now, but.
Well, I was just gonna before I go into the defensive stats, I was just gonna say that it's interesting because if you look at them, they're almost like the complete opposites of themselves, like you're saying. They kind of complement each other quite well. So that's obviously one point that going forward we've got to kind of look about is what player do we feel complement the team better? Because this isn't like a 2 of the exact same player, and it's like, oh, which one do you think is going to be better? It's like, okay, he gives you this, he gives you that. Which one do you actually think will actually not only benefit you in the short term, but potential wise as well benefit you in the long term? Now it's worth noting that defensively, Emi is stats wise a lot better. You can see kind of from what's on screen at the minute with the graphic that he's got a lot more tackles per game, and interceptions are very slightly better, but I think tackles per game highlights more because I always remember him kind of tracking back more down that right hand side and helping out Aaron's. I remember even games like Man City, he was so pivotal in the way that he defensively managed to kind of sustain that overload that they were trying to send down either flank. Whereas with Todd, I don't think it's an unfair thing to say, but I think because you can tell he's a bit more of an offensive threat, he was more of a, okay, I'm going to look to be on that counter to get forward. Whereas with Emi, I think he had a little bit more of a... not like a need, but more of a kind of
I think with Emi, with Emi, it's whether his head's in the game. He has this enthusiasm, and I want to say he has this like aggression about his game, really, that if channeled and if funneled in a productive way, results in sort of, like you say, a real good success rate in terms of tackles that he's making per game. But you've only got to look at the Burnley. It was the Burnley game, wasn't it, when he got sent off? I complete mind blank there for a moment. And that's sort of like what, so long ago now. But that was like, that's what can happen. And that's the thing to Emi, like consider with Emi, is that you have to funnel him and you have to channel him and make sure he's in the right mindset, because if not, then it's not productive and it's not worthwhile. But I think Farke's done a really good job at that. improving that. But with Todd, like, it's no secret, like, this is something that he's had to work on. Todd Cantwell has never probably ever been asked to track back in his life prior to coming into sort of Farke's side, and especially playing on that left-hand side. These are both operating either side of each other, on the left and right of midfield. So there is a lot of defensive work to be done. Both are fairly good at it, and they wouldn't have reached over 30 games in the Premier League for Norwich if they weren't capable of doing that. So I think Emi is the better sort of operator in defensively, and you can rely on him a little bit more, but it's just whether his head's in the game, really.
Yeah, I definitely think, I just want to kind of say one last thing is, you remember the way we do set up, I feel like it favours more so Emi to be more of a defensive kind of minded player, in the way that Jamal Lewis would very rarely overlap Todd Cantwell, because not only that as well, but Todd Cantwell does play a bit more of a kind of free roam role, I guess, compared to Emi Buendia. But you remember when you have Aarons, who's quite an attacking fullback, it's not going to be a shock when Emi does have to drop back into that kind of right back role from time to time if we were to be hit on the break. So I feel like it does benefit Emi in the way that the way we do set up probably would benefit a right midfielder to look more defensive than what a left midfielder would with Lewis. Well, with used to be Lewis behind him. But like pass wise, I mean, I don't know if you want to kind of go into them, Bill, but like,
yeah,
there's quite a big disparity really between them if you look at them.
Yeah, I mean, it strengthens the argument. You've only got, looking at the assists comparison is maybe the simpler way of doing it. But then if you look at the key passes, we haven't got chances created on here, but I think it's no secret that Emi's one of the best was one of the best in the division last year. So I don't think we really need to talk about that. But yeah, 2.3 key passes per game. He's more involved in the build-up. He's more involved in the creation of the play. And then Todd's looking up to get on the end of it. That's not to say that Todd isn't a creative player. But as you can see, like, Emi plays over 10 passes average per game more, but suffers slightly on the pass success rate. Not really much to look into there. Yeah. But Norwich looked to get Emi on the ball quite simply because he's a very good footballer. And I think maybe at times last year there was a little bit of an over-reliance on him, and he actually... maybe Norwich fans expected too much of him, and we all know what happened in terms of Farke dropping him for a game. But no, I mean, the statistics are interesting, and if we maybe move on now to sort of the tactical analysis, looking at the sort of the heat map and the attributes, and I think we get a fairly indication of proving what we've just been saying about Emi's sort of defensive output and his defensive work right there.
No, I think, and again, you can kind of look at heat maps in multiple different ways, and it's hard sometimes to discover what is a good heat map and what's a bad heat map, because do you want a player who's meant to be in the, like, is it bad if a right midfielder stays on the right hand side, for example? So I think, but I just looking at them, and again, these graphics will be on screen as well as we kind of talk over them. You can kind of see that Emi does like to rotate across that kind of front three a little bit more, which doesn't surprise me, because even though Todd does do it, you can tell he's probably more comfortable down that left hand side. And again, I don't want to stress too much on it, but I feel like the role that they're asked to play, I feel like Todd probably gets naturally, if you just look back at even his goals that he scored, a lot of them come from breaking off that left wing. I'm thinking, Arsenal at home, for example, is just a prime example, breaking away on that left wing, whereas Emi can kind of carry the ball across the kind of final third to look to create those kind of openings and opportunities. So that doesn't really surprise me, to be honest. I mean, I don't know if you want to kind of add anything about that, but that's kind of like the conclusion I guess I can draw from looking at those heat maps from last season.
Yeah, I mean, straight away looking at those heat maps, you see the sort of the two dots in the corners. That's because it takes a lot of the set pieces for Norwich. So that'll be for that. I think it's really interesting in Emi, and you can see that sort of the red circle in our own 18-yard box. That says it all, doesn't it? Like, he is going to work back, and he is going to contribute to the defensive aspects that Norwich rely on. I mean, there's pretty much just a red bar right across that sort of right-hand side, and that red is even drifting over to the left. So Emi is all over the place. It's a very interesting heat map, in my opinion. Todd, you'd probably expect that. Like, he pretty much does stay out wide in the build-up, and then comes more centrally and tapers and operates in those pockets of space. Pretty much in the 18-yard box, I would have thought all his goals have come in from there, drifting off from the left into that area of space. So I think Emi's maybe is the sort of most interesting heat map. I think Todd is pretty understandable, and then the attributes is just I think Emi's the green and Todd is the blue. So look, this isn't trying to make us, Emi is the better footballer. I don't think there's any question about that. It's just looking at quite how similar they are. in terms of their technical ability, but there are slight differences and nuances in the way they contribute to Norwich City, both defensively and also offensively.
No, I think it's quite easy to look at the attributes and get carried away and be like, well, obviously he's going to be a better player. But, again, I think, and I remember when I used to be coached by a coach who was originally, I think, like the under 15, 16s coach when Todd Cantwell come through Norwich. And, he said he was probably the best player he's ever seen come through the academy creatively. And I think he has that ability about him. Again, I just feel like he is a bit more competent in front of goal than what Emi Buendia is, and that's why they kind of play those opposite roles, and that's why I expect a lot more kind of attributes to be favoured towards Emi in the kind of creative side of it, because he gets to show off how much of a creative player he is. I definitely think he's a better player, but I guess just to highlight to it a bit more, I think that it favours him a bit more because of the role that he's been asked to play in the kind of Daniel Farke system. In terms of like squad competition in those positions, obviously, if we kind of count Todd as more of like a left-sided midfielder or winger, and Emi as a right, of course we know they can kind of really rotate around like the centre as well, but we're not really going to count them necessarily in that kind of bracket. On the left side, I mean, I don't know if you want to kind of add anything there, Bill, but
no, it's really interesting because we know that Todd predominantly plays on the left and Emi predominantly plays on the right, but you do get the feeling that if Norwich are going to keep at least one of these or potentially even both of these, like that's not even out of the picture yet, that there is going to have to be more flexibility in that. Like we've seen Todd obviously on the weekend put in a really good performance on the right hand side of the pitch, and Todd's worst performances have come on that side of the pitch. So to see him actually contribute really productively, I think I can't remember if I said he was my man of the match, didn't I, in the podcast? So I was really impressed with him. Maybe a little bit more surprised than anything, really, because like I said, we hadn't really seen that productivity on the right hand side from Todd. But look, I don't know if you agree here, but if Emi's playing in any of those three positions in the Championship, I think Norwich have the best player for that position. Maybe if Ben Rama sticks around, then the left midfield, there's probably a debate over that. But Norwich, if Norwich are probably going to use these in a slightly different way, I think, if they do stay around. The attacking midfield position as it stands at the time of recording is quite packed. You've got 6 players across those 3 positions plus Todd and Emi. So it doesn't take a genius to work that doesn't fit. So there's going to have to be some movement there for sure.
I think just looking at it, obviously positional wise, you've kind of got to look at your only real like right-sided wing option being Josh Martin. As much as I think he's going to be a fantastic player coming through, you don't really want to sell Emi, for example, and know that Todd can't really operate on that right wing, and then you've just got Josh Martin or someone playing out of position.
You say that, but then, like we say, Todd played really well, and maybe in the Championship, like we should maybe expect a little bit more from Todd on that right-hand flank. I get the point. And also Dow's also played on that right-hand side as well, hasn't he? So I think he's considered an option. I'd like to see Placater out wide on the right as well, actually.
I feel like the only downside is we're playing like a Todd or a Dow out there. I do feel like they're wasted compared to being in that kind of either number 10 role or out on the left flank for Todd more so, because I just feel like they're not... They're obviously like they're versatile players. They can play across that front three. We don't really play in set positions. We have quite like a positionless like way of going forward, and in that essence, like it's not going to affect it. But like seeing Kieran Dowell kind of bomb down the wing, well, he's not a winger. You can kind of see that. No. And likewise with Todd Cantwell. And I feel like with Emi Buendia, obviously he is more of a right midfielder, and having just Josh Martin as a backup is fine because I think it's great backup. But him as a sole player, if we were to sell Emi, that would make me a little bit more worried.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I mean, in terms of who's dispensable in that list that we have up now on the squad competition, I think Marcus Stiepermann probably could be sold. Absolutely. He's performed brilliantly for us, but let's not cling on to that sentiment. Daniel Stanani probably could benefit with a loan move away, maybe particularly in the Championship or League One, just to sort of get that adjustment to sort of English football, really. And I think Josh Martin may be the same. Like, I really want to see Josh around. I think he's got a lot of attributes which will benefit him in the long run in terms of being very fluid in operating on either flank. Like I don't think even the club really know where he's best suited. He's young, he fits the homegrown quota, which benefits him. So I wonder if Josh might stick around and just sort of learn his trade and try and pick up minutes here and there. But it's not. I can't see a situation where Dow, Todd, and Emi are all here because I think they all probably want to play in the 10 or in those areas of the pitch. So it'll be an interesting sort of like conclusion to the transfer window. Obviously, we have no idea what's happening. Like, there's still a month, I think, left, isn't it, altogether? So who knows?
I think from an outside looking in as well, there's been clear signs of the potential replacement for a player like Todd. I know I kind of highlighted this in our last podcast, but I feel like Kieran Dowell could be seen as a direct replacement. And I know Plaqueta isn't the same kind of player, but he plays that same kind of side, and you could call that a replacement in itself. And whereas we haven't really had that from Emi Buendia, like there's no one has come in, which is like, okay, he's a right-sided player. He's like Emi. He's definitely off. Whereas I feel like with Todd, there is a case for potentially two players, which position-wise and I guess the type of player he is could suggest that he would be more likely to be sold.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think the thing is as well, Norwich have been utilising these two out wide, but we're going to talk about it just in a moment. But in terms of where these players will go, I don't think really, unless there's another side utilising the sort of narrow 4-2-3-1 like Norwich do, that they're going to be looking to play these lads out wide. I think Todd and Emi will be recruited if they are recruited in that number 10 position.
Yeah, I think that's rightfully so as well, because I think we've been almost spoiled for too much talent in that area, and I think they would flourish in that role. And I think that's why we were probably so surprised by Todd, because he got that opportunity to play in that kind of that number 10 more so than before, really. And I think that's probably why he kind of surprised us against Huddersfield. But if you look at the kind of like the rumoured clubs that Todd Cantwell has been rumoured to be kind of going to, if you like, you've got Leicester, Liverpool, Sheffield United, and Newcastle. Now, of course, all Premier League teams, so it's going to be a definite step up for him. And I think looking at how we played last season, and we've kind of agreed about this before, I definitely feel like his type of play is very much suited to that Premier League. I think you get a little bit more time on the ball, a little bit less physical. And I do think he shows up for the big games. So he relishes that opportunity to play against the big players and, play on the kind of TV a bit more often as well. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but I think when you're in a championship and you're looking for a bit of a dogfight, is that the player that you want to have in your squad? And I don't think that's an unfair thing to say. I just think it's a point that deserves to be highlighted. But I mean, what do you think from the clubs that are there? Is there any that you feel like from an outside looking in that may benefit him a bit more?
I think the obvious one is Leicester to eventually be a replacement for James Maddison. Yeah. I would be fascinated to see Todd in sort of like a midfield three, like play a little bit deeper. Whether that's sort of realistic, I don't know. But it doesn't. I mean, look, for what it's worth, I don't think any of these clubs will sign Todd Cantwell. This is just what's been in the rumour mill over the summer. So Newcastle, no, because they have Ryan Fraser and St. Maximin for that position. Like I say, I think Leicester is probable. Sheffield United, it doesn't appear to be like the obvious one, but I think back to how they've had like David Brooks and Kieran Dowell on their side in previous campaigns. It sounds silly, but they signed Ravel Morrison, didn't they, last summer? So there is evidently a need. Like, put it this way, nothing would surprise me if Sheffield United's recruitment, like they signed Sander Berge and Jack Rodwell 6 months apart. Like, I don't know what their policy is. So, and Liverpool would be an unbelievable move, but you look at the profile of central midfielders and wide players, and he doesn't fit it. So that would appear unlikely unless they are looking to go a different route.
I definitely think that the only way that Liverpool sign him is if there's some kind of potential injury that happens before the window shuts. I don't think they're the type of club that would, as we've learned, go out and spend 20 million on anyone, let alone a young English prospect. And I
definitely
feel like
not left back.
Oh, that's the thing, right? Like, but we'll ruin his career by keeping him here. Anyway, I think with Sheffield United, I think it'll be interesting to see him go somewhere like that, because I do think it's entertaining the way that Chris Wilder gets him playing, and I think the way they kind of get most of their chances are through like Norwood and Fleck almost, and they're kind of more like two sitting midfielders, so they're almost crying out for that kind of man in the hole to kind of do that work. And I think it would be interesting with the way they play with quite attacking wing backs like Norwich do to see if he can maybe fit in there. But like you say, it's so sporadic that the way that they recruit, it's a bit bizarre. I think Newcastle are pretty good for that position. Not only like you say that they have the two wide options, but they also have Miguel Almiron, which even though he hasn't been the best signing, he's still turned it around a little bit, and I think he's turned a corner, and I think he's a good fit for them. And I think, like I say, Leicester only sign him if Maddison leaves, and Maddison is not going to leave this summer, 100%. So I don't think, like say, any of these clubs will buy him, but we can kind of both agree that it's going to be a Premier League club that he moves to, isn't it?
It is, and it just like by Norwich selling Todd Cantwell or Emi Buendia, like it doesn't mean that they won't get the luxury of playing this season. I could foresee Todd's going to Leicester and being loaned back, and then in the presumption that Maddison's sold next summer. Like I think that would make sort of perfect sense, really. But I mean, there's lots of who knows. To be honest, we're just sort of speculating here, aren't we?
Well, looking at Emi Buendia, the three clubs that are kind of interested in him in a minute is Atletico Madrid, Leeds, and West Ham. Now, I guess looking at kind of like those three teams, is there one that sticks out to you a bit more? Because I feel like with Emi, there's a couple which I would probably say would be a better fit than what it would, for example, for Todd, for example.
Yeah, I mean, we've said this before, haven't we? I think on Norwich Talk, surprise, that we could just see Emi relishing under sort of in Atletico Madrid. So the Leeds one's an interesting one. I think I read a story today that's not happening. So there's probably nothing to read in that. And to be honest, I wouldn't send like my worst enemy to West Ham at the moment. So I definitely wouldn't want Emi going there. So Atletico, I don't know about you if you still hold this viewpoint, but that appears to be the one that would make the most sense to me.
I think Simeone would absolutely bring the best Emi Buendia possible, and I think it would be a defensive system which he would benefit in the way that as we talked about earlier, he can adapt to that defensive system, and I feel like he has that kind of flair of that Spanish football that we saw him have before when he played for Getafe and other clubs. I can't remember which he played for in the second tier of the Spanish league, which makes me think that he would benefit greatly from going there. I think West Ham, not only do they I don't think it'd be a great fit for him personally going there, but they have players like Yarmolenko, Jack Bowen down that side. They have Pablo Fornals. Like they have quality players, and I think it's, as we've kind of seen in the media recently, I don't think it's the players necessarily that the whole problem there. I think it's a lot of a wider issue, and I don't think there'd be a kind of club that would financially, by the sounds of it as well, be able to afford a player like Emi Buendia. As of Leeds, I think Leeds would also be a really cool fit for him. I think Marcelo Bielsa would be another kind of Simeone-esque player, which can really galvanise a player and kind of, especially with Emi and his attitude problems sometimes, I feel like he would really, really benefit playing under him. But as you say, and with the money they've spent and with the players they've got, and we saw them against Liverpool the other night, I think they've got a pretty settled squad. And, quality-wise, they've got players like Helder Costa on the wing, Jack Harrison, which, don't get me wrong, like, that he's a better player, but I still think that it's very unlikely that they'll want to sign someone like Buendia.
Yeah, or be able to. I mean, you talk about like the wide players Leeds have. I actually think he'd be more of a central midfielder, like in a weird way. Like if you look at someone like Pablo Hernandez, and I think Buendia would be like a perfect like long-term replacement for Pablo Hernandez, in terms of like the chance creation, his energy and his enthusiasm across the pitch. So I think the sort of point that all three of these clubs share is like whether you like it or not, they are three big clubs with big reputations and very historical football clubs. So for me, like if Emi's going to go to one of them, isn't he? He's going to go to a club that holds, is very revered, and whether they're in the right place at the moment or not in regards to West Ham, like I do think Emi Buendia is a big club player.
I feel like as horrible as it is to say it, and as much as no Norwich fan wants to hear it, like we are a stepping stone club, and I think especially in the money kind of ball and the way that Stuart Webber has kind of set the club up, not only for whilst he is here, but going forward, we are going to become that kind of Southampton-esque club that has a very good academy with a very good reputation. Fine. And I think that's the thing. I'm happy with that because I know that I'm going to see players blossom here and then go on to bigger and better things in the future. And unless you are in that elite category of teams financially, you're never going to break into that. And I think, that's the thing for me is as long as you're happy that, look, we can sit here and go, wow, Emi Buendia, what a season. If he leaves, I'm just glad that I got to see him play. And I think that's the nice thing, is that we've got all this talent, everyone here, and they will leave. It's just a case of, hopefully financially, the club can benefit from that in the long run.
I think like the ideal situation would have been if Norwich survived relegation last year and could have built on the foundations that me and you have spoke a lot, maybe not on podcast, but in person, about how that campaign really felt like there was a sort of like nucleus of talent that could rise up, and we wouldn't have to sell, and the club could progress with, and that it didn't happen. Maybe we weren't really as aware of sort of the financial situation at the club, but I completely agree. Like, Norwich are a selling club, but as are Barcelona when Neymar's release clause is met. That's what I always say. Like, every club's a selling club. Norwich are self-sustainable, which is maybe more of a poignant point. There we go. Use that again. But no, like, I completely agree. Like, hopefully there will be a day where we have this talent come through, that we can keep hold of them. I think, especially with someone like Todd Cantwell, like, Norwich fans want to believe that, like, he's a Norwich fan. He's a Norfolk lad, and he's going to spend, he's going to do a Mark Noble and never leave. But like, he's not a Norwich fan. There is this narrative around him being a local lad, which is correct. But like, he doesn't support us. He is an Arsenal fan. He doesn't have that emotional attachment that maybe a lot of Norwich fans presume that he does. And that I want that sort of figure. The James Ward-Prowses, those type of players. I want that more than anybody. But let's be real. Like, in the modern day, like, that is scarce. And the way that Norwich run, you sign someone like Emi Buendia for a very low fee, or you bring through a Todd Cantwell, you develop them, and 2 or 3 seasons later, they're gone for a fee, and then you reinvest that. And then the idea is, after 5-10 years, if you carry on buying Emi Buendias for 2 million and selling them for 20, you can reinvest that in the squad, and the club can rise with these players. But yeah, I mean, if Norwich can keep hold of even one of these, I think it'll be a real coup.
No, I think, and I guess this is like a last point before we kind of go on to the definitive answer of kind of which one we would personally sell. I think it's worth noting as well that as time progresses, obviously these players are going to want to feature for the national teams. Obviously, Todd Cantwell's playing for the under 21s, is it? Under 20, under 21s. I can't remember if it was the 22s or not. It was there's like a weird age gap there. I think it might be the under 19s in England. Yeah. And obviously, if he gets to that point where he wants to try and make a push for the first team, which obviously it looks a million miles away now, but it's really not hard if you put a good run together in the Premier League. Is that going to come and make a decision? We see Emi Buendia, he's obviously 23 years old now, so he's obviously outside of that threshold of any kind of youth squad. If he knows that he can go to a Diego Simeone ran Atletico Madrid side, play Champions League, and then potentially play in the national team, that can make the decision itself. So you've got to take that into consideration, that these players are going to have personal goals that I think is going to drive them to obviously leaving the club. I don't think Norwich are going to get the pick of like, oh, do you want to sell him or him? It's going to be obviously which one goes at the time. But I guess to kind of end it on, unless you have anything else to say.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point, because I don't know the situation with Argentina's squad, and I'm not going to pretend to. I presume that Emi Buendia can't be far off if he gets a big move, like, and performs well. Like, I refuse to believe that they have that much more talent. But with Todd Cantwell's vision, that it is like, it's heavily populated, isn't it? And I don't think he'll be a mainstay within an England squad. I could see him getting an appearance and a few call-ups, because Jack Grealish has done it, and I don't think they're a million miles away. I think Grealish is the better player, but you could foresee Todd having a really good season next year in the Premier League or something, and making that step up. But you're right. Players have personal goals. They're not all Norwich fans. Well, none of them are Norwich fans, as far as I know. So, like, unfortunately, that is just the reality of it.
The only allegiance they have to the club is the contract, and unfortunately nowadays that kind of that's just a bit of paper in it nowadays. So, but I would say, to kind of end things off, I would say personally, I would keep Emi Buendia every day of the week. I love Todd Cantwell as a player, but I do think he is a very replaceable player, and I think he's already been replaced with someone who is at our level as good. Whether or not the ceiling of Kieran Dowell is as high as Todd Cantwell, we'll have to wait and see. But I really think that if we were to say, for example, get 20 to 25 million for Todd Cantwell, and then we were to sign Kieran Dowell for 3 million, I mean, if you can weigh those deals up and somehow say that Todd Cantwell would have been worth keeping over that, I personally don't see that. But
yeah,
what about you, Billy?
And we don't know. Yeah, we don't know what Dow's ceiling is. Like, we've hardly even seen him. We've hyped him up a lot in the podcast, and unfortunately after Saturday we're having to sort of be quiet on that. But like, that is the definition of the model, isn't it? Like, Norwich sold James Maddison for 25 million, and right, okay, not a direct replacement, but let's be real, Todd Cantwell and James Maddison, like, there's a similarity there, right? You then sell Todd Cantwell for, let's say, 20 million pounds, and your replacement is a Kieran Dow who's of the same or similar age. I can't quite remember. I think it's pretty much the same, isn't it? So, like, that's the model. Like, that's how Norwich work, and I don't know if it's because we're like quite nerdy about that sort of stuff, like about Football Manager and like all that sort of like the boring stuff of it. But like, that excites me that like Norwich could then sell Kieran Dow for a similar fee, and then you do it again, and that process is repeated, and the club is strengthened financially. So I'm in complete agreement. The other thing to remember is that Todd only has he's in his second year of his contract, or the remaining last 2 years of a contract.
Was Emi signed a new contract in the summer, so he had an extra year when he signed it, I think. So.
Yeah, I think he's on like 3 or 4 years left, so like it's a lot safer with him. But I feel like now is the time to sell Todd. I'd love to keep Todd around, but I just like, that's not how Norwich's model works, and I don't think it would be that beneficial for the club. I can't really see Todd's value rising anymore than it is, unless he signs a new deal and performs well.
Well, I think that the new deal is something that it's. I feel like you say, it's kind of that decision needs to be made now. If he doesn't sign, he's sold. I think that could be the case, but I guess that's probably a kind of good point to end it on. Now, obviously, I hope you guys have enjoyed the video. It's a little bit different to what we normally do. I know it's still going to be like half an hour long, but obviously our podcast is a little bit longer and a little bit more around kind of more topics. We'd love to kind of get your interaction as well in the comments, just hearing on kind of what we've presented today on whether you feel Buendia or Cantwell should be sold, and just a little bit about the kind of obviously the points that we've put forward. If you like hearing from us, or you want to kind of get in any contact with us and have a chat with us, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, and we also have our podcast release on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. If you want to get in touch with us, all of our handles are the Revere End, not the Revere End Pod, as I said last time. But until next time, we'll see you guys later.